Welcome to our channel. It's your teacher, Mr. Mulenga C. So today I want us to look at Social Studies, that is 2024 Grade 9 past paper. So this is for internal candidates. So when you are writing the exam, it is very important that you take time to go through the instructions because instructions are part of the exam. So this paper carries about 100 marks and the duration of the time of the paper is 2 hours 30 minutes. So the instructions include that you must be able to write your examination number, school center, and code on the answer booklet. Now, I must remind you that this year 2025, the exams that you are going to write, the answers must be written in the same question paper. So there will be no extra answer sheet. The other very important thing that you have to take note of on the instructions is that there are 3 sections in the paper. That is section A, B, and C. So for section A, that's where you find multiple choice questions from question 1 to question 40. Then section B, you find some short answers, questions, that is questions carrying 30 marks, 1 question for geography, 1 question for history, and the other question for civics, each one of them carrying 10 marks. So that is a total of 30 marks in section B. Then section C, that is where you write now short essays. Now in short essays, there is part 1, part 2, and part 3, and you only choose 1 question from each part. This is very important. In section C, only choose 1 question from each part. Even if you know all the 3 questions from 1 part, just choose 1 question. So that is very important for you to take note of. Now, without wasting much of the time, I would like us to go straight to section A. Now for section A, question 1 to 6, based on map reading. So we shall have a separate video specifically for map reading. So today, I want us to start from question 7. Now, question 7 says, study the following map and answer question 7 and 8. Now, if you look at the map, what is very important, first of all, when you're looking at the map, is to take note of what the key is saying. So the key is like the dictionary of the map. So here, we're able to tell that the shaded area has to look like that, the rail line has to look like that, a town has to look like that, and a river has to look like that, and the lake has to look like this. So this is very important when you are looking at the map. Now, what is question 7 saying? Now, question 7 says, what is the height of the land in the shaded area A? What is the height of the land in the shaded area A? Now, area A, this all shaded area is an area that belongs to the high veld. Remember, we have the high veld, middle veld, as well as low veld. So the high veld is land that is over 1,200 meters above sea level. Then the middle veld is land between 900 meters and 1,200 meters above sea level. Then the low veld is land below 900 meters above sea level. And then if you look at the map, this shaded area, area A here, is basically the high veld. So the best possible answer on question 7 is D, over 1,200 meters above sea level. Let's get to 8. Question 8 says, name town B. Name town B. Now, town B is here, and this is a border town bordering Zambia and Tanzania. So the best possible answer for town B is D. Nakonde. Now let's get to question 9. Now question 9 says, study the following diagram and answer questions 9 and 10. Now what we're able to see here is an instrument that is used to measure rainfall. Now, question 9 says, what is the weather instrument shown in the diagram? So what weather instrument do we use to measure rainfall? So the best possible answer on question 9 is B, rain gauge. Now let's get to question 10. Now question 10 says, the weather instrument is raised 30 centimeters from the ground to, why do we raise the rain gauge to 30 centimeters from the ground? So the best possible answer on question 10 is C, prevent splashes falling into the instrument. Now question 11 says, which one of the following cash crops is mainly grown around Chpata? So the best possible answer on question 11 is A, cotton. So around Chpata, the cash crop that is mainly grown is cotton. Other than that, there is also tobacco being grown around that area. But the best possible answer on question 11 is A, cotton. Let's get to question 12. Now question 12 says, commercial dairying is important around Lusaka due to, so the best possible answer on question 12 is C, high demand for milk. So there is high demand for milk around Lusaka. Let's get to question 13. Now question 13 says, the possible dangers to the environment brought by commercial farming in Zambia is, so the best possible answer on question 13 is B, deforestation and soil erosion. Let's get to question 14. Now question 14 says, the rate of the natural increase of population is calculated by, now whenever you see the concept of natural increase, the first thing that you should think of is birth rate and death rate. Now, how do we find natural increase? Now, natural increase is found by subtracting death rate from birth rate. That is when you're going to know if the population is increasing or decreasing. So if the birth rate is higher than the death rate, you know that the population is increasing. But if the death rate is higher than the birth rate, then the population is decreasing. So the best possible answer on question 14 is D, subtracting death rate from birth rate. Let's get to question 15. Now question 15 says, detailed information on our cultural background can be gathered through, so the best possible answer on question 15 is A, anthropology. Let's get to question 16. Study the following picture and answer question 16. Now, this is the earth depicted as a flaming bulb. So the earth was a flaming bulb. So according to the picture, which theory explains the beginning of the earth? The best possible answer on question 16 is D, scientific. Now, question 17 says, study the following picture and answer question 17. Study the following picture and answer question 17. So there is an early amphibian in this picture, as you can see. So during evolution, the creature shown in the picture lived. So the best possible answer on question 17 is A, both in water and on land. Let's get to question 18. Now question 18 says, which one of the following events happened first? Which one of the following events happened first? Now, remember BC means before Christ was born. So, in this case, if you look at question 18, asking for the events which happened first or earlier, the best possible answer here on question 18 is D, 1500 BC. Egypt defeats Kush. So meaning that is 1500 years before Christ was born. You expect 430 BC to be closer to today than 1500 BC. So the best possible answer on question 18 is D, 1500 BC. Now let's get to question 19. Now question 19 says, who discovered the skull of Proconsul Africanus? Now the one who discovered the skull of Proconsul Africanus is Dr. Louis Leake. So the best possible answer on question 19 is C, Louis Leake. Let's get to question 20 and 21. Now, study the following map and answer questions 20 and 21. So we have a key here. So if you look at this map of Africa and part of Asia and Europe on top of Africa there, we are able to see rivers. There's river now here, Euphrates and Tigris. So these are areas, as the map is indicating, settled farming and cattle keeping along river valleys. I told you earlier that when you're looking at any map, what is very important is for you to see the key, because the key is the dictionary of the map. So we're able to see what the key is saying, and we're able to tell these features on the map. Now let's get to the question. Now question 20 says, which river is associated with origin of pastoralism? Which river is associated with the origin of pastoralism? So the best possible answer on question 20 is C, Now, the Now River. This river here, the Now River. Now let's get to question 21. Early farmers were attracted to settle in the shaded areas mainly due to, so the best possible answer on question 21 is C, fertile river valleys. So these shaded areas on the map attracted people to settle around here due to fertile land. So the best possible answer on question 21. So the best possible answer on question 21 is C, fertile river valleys. Let's get to question 22. Now question 22 says, study the following picture showing a warlike ceremony and answer question 22 and 23. Now, question 22 says, what Zambian traditional ceremony is shown in the picture? So the best possible answer on question 22 is B, Nkwala ceremony. Nkwala ceremony. Let's get to question 23. Now, question 23 says, name the Bantu-speaking people that celebrate the ceremony shown in the picture. So the ceremony shown in the picture is celebrated by the Ngoni people of Eastern Province. So the best possible answer on question 23 is D, Ngoni. Let's get to question 24. Now question 24 says, who explored part of Niger River between 1844 and 1845? Who explored part of the Niger River between 1844 and 1845. So the best possible answer on question 24 is enrich birth. Now let's get to question 25. Question 25 says, Cecil Rhodes' dream for Africa was to, so the best possible answer is A, build a railway line from Cape to Cairo. Let's get to question 26. Now question 26 says, which political party did Harry Nkumbula form in 1948? So the best possible answer on question 26 is B, Northern Rhodesia African National Congress, NRANC. Let's get to question 27. Now, question 27 says, Michael Sata was Zambia's dash president. So the best possible answer on question 27 is A, fifth president. So the best possible answer on question 27 is A, fifth president. Let's get to question 28. What was Zambia called before independence? So the best possible answer on question 28 is A, Northern Rhodesia. Let's get to question 29. The dash color on the Zambian flag represents vegetation in Zambia. So the best possible answer on question 29 is B, green. The green color on the Zambian flag represents vegetation in Zambia. Let's get to question 30. Now, question 30 says, why is a chiefdom said to be a dictatorship? So the best possible answer on question 30 is D, rulers inherit leadership. Nobody votes for them. Let's get to question 31. Now, question 31 says, a set of rules or laws by which people agree to be governed is called, so the best possible answer on question 31 is C, Constitution. Let's get to question 32. Question 32 says, Masiliso was born in Monze district of Zambia in 2008. He is a citizen of Zambia by, the best possible answer on question 32 is B, birth. Let's get to question 33. Which of the following is not a feature of the National Registration Card, NRC? So the best possible answer on question 33 is B, height. On the green National Registration Card, you won't find height there. Of course, the date of birth is there, place of birth, as well as the village and other features, but you won't find the height there. So the best possible answer is B, height. Let's get to question 34. Now, question 34 says, what do we call a system of government where a minority group with special privilege hold power over the majority? So the best possible answer on question 34 is oligarchy. Oligarchy. Let's get to question 35. Now, question 35 says, Chipo Kambaza stood as a candidate and lost in the recently held local government election. However, she gathered enough evidence of malpractice. What course of action can she be advised to take? So the best possible answer on question 35 is B, petition the results in the courts of law. And there is a specific court that hears election petitions, and this court is the Constitutional Court. It is the highest court in as much as election petitions are concerned in constitutional matters in Zambia. It is at the same level as the Supreme Court. Let's get to question 36. Now, question 36 says, which of the following rights does not fall under civil and political rights? Now, civil and political rights are the most important rights. Now, which of these rights highlighted on question 36 does not fall under civil and political rights? So the best possible answer on question 36 is A, food. So the right to food does not fall under civil and political rights. Let's get to question 37. Now question 37 says, study the following diagram showing the number of girls who re-entered school after giving birth in Mapunzilo district in 2000 and answer questions 37 and 38. Now, it is very important to understand what the bar graph is showing us here. So at the bottom here, we have grades, that is grade 6, 7, 8, and 9. Then on the sides here, we have number of girls re-entered, that is 10, 20, and 30. So how many girls re-entered grade 8 in Mapunzilo district? How many girls entered grade 8 in Mapunzilo district? So we've seen grade 8 is here, and it is going right in between 10 and 20 at the center here. And approximately we are able to tell that this is 15. In the middle between 10 and 20, you expect to find 15 here. So the best possible answer on question 37 is C, 15. So that is the best possible answer there. Let's get to question 38. Now question 38 says, the grade which had the highest number of girls who re-entered school is, now let's see the graph. So we have grade 9 here. Grade 9 has the highest number at 30. So the best possible answer on question 38 is D, grade 9. Let's get to question 39. Now question 39 says, trade in which there is payment for the services but there is no exchange of physical goods is known as. So the best possible answer on question 39 is C, invisible trade. Now, invisible trade is trade that does not involve, exchange of physical goods, but it involves exchange of services. For example, you offer services such as security. There, you offer services such as security to someone who is performing music. There is an exchange of the service of one entertainment, then the other security. There are no goods involved, but there is an exchange of services. So such type of trade where there are no physical goods, but there are services involved, we call it invisible trade. For visible trade, it involves physical goods. Let's get to question 40. Now, question 40 says, which international organization is headed by the British monarch? So the international organization headed by the British monarch is the Commonwealth of Nations. So the best possible answer on question 40 is Commonwealth of Nations. Now, let's get to section B. Let's get to section B. Let's get to section B. Now, section B has 3 questions. They are compulsory questions. You must attempt to answer all questions without even leaving in blank spaces in the exam. So, if you look at section B, where we are saying, study the following map and answer the questions that follow. Now, if you've paid particular attention when it comes to social studies, geography especially, the past papers always have questions with maps. So you need to be very familiar with the map of Zambia especially, as well as the map of Africa. You need to know where countries are located. You need to know where rivers are located. You need to know where lakes are located, national parks are located, and so on. It is very important that you have the map at the back of your head, because you are going to find that map in the final exam. So please make it a habit to understand the features found on the map and where they are located. And remember, like I'm always guiding you, before you even do anything on the map, first of all, pay particular attention to what the key is saying, because the key is the dictionary of the map. So we know that a lake looks like that, like a river here. We know that a river looks like this, like River E here. We know that a national park looks like this, like National Park C here. We know that towns look like this, like Town B here, and Chipata here on the east. And Chipata here in the east. Now, let's get to question A. Question A says, name town A and B. Now, town A, we already answered this. This is the border town Mpudungu. The border town Mpudungu. Just remember that the town that is closest to Lake Tanganyika is Mpudungu. Then town B is Mongu. Town B is Mongu. Town B is Mongu. Now let's get to B. Name National Park C. What is this national park? Now, National Park C is Kafue National Park. National Park C is Kafue National Park. National Park C is Kafue National Park. It is the largest national park in Zambia and one of the world's largest national parks. Now, let's get to C. Now, C says, state two means of transport used by tourists visiting National Park C. Now, what modes of transport do tourists use visiting National Park C? So we have road, we have air, transport as well. So that is very key for you to understand. Other than that, you can also include water. Water transport is also used, air transport is used, as well as road transport. We don't have a railway passing through Kafue National Park, so rail transport does not exist there. But you can cite examples of road transport, air transport, as well as water transport. Now let's get to D. Now D says, name 3 tourist activities which are important along River E. Now this is River E again. Name 3 tourist activities which are important along River E. That is D. Name 3 tourist activities which are important along River E. Now, there are a number of tourist activities that are important along River E, and some of those activities include walking safaris or walking trips, boat safaris, night drives, Luangwa Safari House, game drives. We have also water sports, boat cruising. All those are activities that tourists tend to have on River E. Now, let's get to Nkwali Camp, Braid Safaris, Kawazi Village, Bush Spa, Tribal Textiles, Photographic Safaris, Local Village Visits, and so on. So those are some of the activities that you find along River E. Now let's get to E. E says, why do poachers kill or capture wild animals? Identify 2 reasons. So you can cite as many reasons as possible. So why do poachers kill or capture wild animals? Identify 2 reasons. Identify 2 reasons. Now, one of the reasons is for meat, the other reason is for skin, and the other reason is for tusks and horns. So, for elephant tusks or rhino horns. So, poachers kill or capture wild animals for the main reason of meat, selling game meat, for the skin, as well as tusks and horns. So you can just pick any 2 from those. Now let's get to our next question. Now our next question is an interesting question. This is a history question, and the question study the following pyramid and answer the questions that follow. Study the following pyramid and answer the questions that follow. Now, we have a paramount king. He controlled other kings and chiefs. Then we have a king. He controlled several chiefs. Sometimes he obeyed and paid tribute to a more powerful king. Then we have a chief. He controlled several headmen. Sometimes he obeyed and paid tribute to a king. Then we have at A, he controlled a village. Sometimes he obeyed and paid tribute to a chief or a king. So who do you find at A? Who do you find at A? At A, who do you find there? Now, before we get to that, let us attempt to answer A. What type of society is shown in the pyramid? What type of society is shown in the pyramid? So the pyramid shows a centralized society. The pyramid shows a centralized society. Let's get to B. Mention 4 Bantu groups in Zambia that were governed under the system shown in the pyramid. So we have the Bemba, the Lozi Olui, Lunda, Luvale, Chewa, Ngoni. Those were centralized groups. An example of the decentralized Bantu groups include the Tonga, Ila, as well as the Lenje. Those were decentralized. But if you talk about the Bemba, Lozi, Olui, Lunda, Luvale, Chewa, Ngoni, these were highly centralized Bantu groups. Let's get to C. Name the title marked A on the pyramid. Obviously, on the pyramid, you expect to find the village headman. So, just below the chief, we had the village headman. The village headman. So, that is the best possible answer on question C. Name the title marked A on the pyramid. Now, let's get to D. According to the pyramid, who paid tribute to a king? Obviously, the one who paid tribute to the king is a chief. Then the king paid tribute to a paramount king who happened to be a more powerful king. Then let's get to E. Give 2 reasons for paying tribute to the king. Give 2 reasons for paying tribute to the king. So the reasons for paying tribute to a king included a sign of loyalty. A sign of loyalty. Then the other reason was to enable them to maintain the status of his office. To enable them to maintain the status of his office. Then the other reason for paying tribute to the king was to enable them discharge the traditional function of his office under African customary law in a conquered chiefs. Let's get to F. Explain how leadership system shown in the pyramid spread to Zambia. Explain how the leadership system shown in the pyramid spread to Zambia. Now, when you're answering, please pay particular attention to the marks allocated. If you see 2 marks, it means you have to raise a minimum of 2 points. If you see 1 mark, it means you have to raise at least a point. If you see 4 marks, it means you have to give at least 4 points. Please always pay attention to the marks allocated to each question or to each question. Let's get to F. So the best possible answer on F is through migration, Bantu Luba Lunda migrations. That is how the leadership system shown in the pyramid spread to Zambia. It was through migrations or Bantu Luba Lunda migrations. Let's get to civics. Now, question 3 is the civics question, always as per tradition. Now, question 3 says, with reference to the United Nations Organization, UNO, answer the questions that follow. When was the UN organization formed? When was the UN formed? Now, I love this date because it reminds me of Zambia's independence, because it was on the same day Zambia gained independence that even the UN organization was formed, except the year. Of course, Zambia gained independence on 24th October 1964, but the United Nations Organization was formed on 24th October 1945, just at the end of the Second World War. Let's get to 3B. Now 3b says state 3 organs of the United Nations organization. State 3 organs of the United Nations organization. Now we have the General Assembly, we have the Security Council, as well as the Secretariat, the International Court of Justice, Economic and Social Council, Trusteeship Council, and the like. So if you look at these are very key organs of the UN, and they exist in this same particular order. At the top of the summit there, you have the General Assembly. After the General Assembly, you have the Security Council, then the Secretariat, then the International Court of Justice, which is found in Hague, Switzerland. We have the Economic and Social Council. We have the Trusteeship Council. So these are very key organs of the UN. Now, sometimes in the exam, they may ask you a question to say, which one of the organs of the UNO is the most powerful organ? So the most powerful organ is the Security Council. So the Security Council is the most powerful organ, and that is for the reason that the Security Council has been given the mandate to maintain world peace. It has been given the mandate to make sure that they send peacekeepers and troops to war zone areas. So the Security Council is the most powerful organ of the United Nations organization. Let's get to C. List 3 agencies of the United Nations organization. List 3 agencies of the United Nations organization. So there are quite a number of agencies. There are quite a number of agencies of the United Nations. We have the World Health Organization. We have the Food and Agriculture Organization. We have the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. We have the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF. We have the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR. We have the International Labour Organization, ILO. We have the International Monetary Fund, IMF. We have the World Trade Organization, WTO. We have the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. We have International Criminal Court, ICC. We have International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. So these are just some of the many United Nations agencies. So you can just pick any of the ones we have highlighted here. Now let's get to D. Now D says, how does Zambia benefit as a member of the United Nations organization? So here are some of the ways Zambia benefits as a member of the United Nations. So you can just mention any of these many ways Zambia benefits. So the UN or the United Nations organization offers the following to Zambia. It delivers humanitarian aid. It promotes fundamental freedom. It protects human rights and champions human rights. It maintains international peace and security. It addresses and integrates service provision for health, education, and skills. It also supports the attainment of Sustainable Development Goals 2030. It also provides clean water and sanitation. It also helps in the construction of dams. It also offers technical expertise and resources. It also connects local communities' needs to global audiences. It also helps to reduce inequalities and eradicate poverty. It also provides peacekeepers, protects civilians, and actively prevents conflicts and reduces violence. So if all these are some of the benefits that member states of the United Nations accrue from being members of the United Nations. Let's get to section C. Let's get to section C. Now, section C, just to remind you, section C has 9 questions coming from 3 parts. Each part has 3 questions. So there are 3 parts in this section. Answer one question from each part. So answer one question from part 1, answer one question from part 2, and answer one question from part 3. That is very key for you to take note of. Do not answer more than one question from each part. Only a maximum of one question should be answered from each part. So part 1 is always the geography part, then part 2 is the history part, part 3 is the civics part. So only choose one question from each part. So part 1. Part 1 says, describe distribution of major fisheries in Zambia. Describe the distribution of major fisheries in Zambia. Now, when you talk about Zambia's major fisheries, we have quite a number of them. So we have Lake Kariba. Now, on Lake Kariba, you can just say a few things. You say, it is a man-made lake located on Zambezi River. This lake was restocked with fish by introducing fingerlings, baby fish, bream from Chilanga Fish Farm and carpenter from Lake Tanganyika. The lake is also popular with, fishermen from all over the world who come to catch fish. And this lake, Lake Kariba, you find it at the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Now let's get to another fishery, Lake Tanganyika. Now, Lake Tanganyika is found on the northern part of the country. It is well known for fresh water, sardines, carpenter, and its main fish caught there is buka buka, which is also known as naupet. So at Lake Tanganyika, this is a lake or a fishery that is shared by about 4 countries. That is Zambia, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Burundi. So these countries share this fishery. So upon talking about Lake Tanganyika like that, you can now go to Bangweulu. Now, Bangweulu is another fishery. You can say on this lake, the surrounding swamps, the many canals, channels, and lagoons act as waterways for fishing boats and canoes. Fishermen build temporary shelters on islands. It has a number of species such as tiger, green-headed and red-headed bream, and so on. Then we can also talk about Lake Mweru, which is another fishery shared by Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo. So you can talk about Lake Mweru, you can talk about Kafue River, which forms the greatest part of the fishery due to abundant fish food that is available. You can also talk about the Zambezi River. You can also talk about the, fisheries. You can also talk about fish farms, dams, and the like. So you can also talk about swamps. So 1 mark for name and description. So make sure that you raise points according to the marks that have been allocated. If you see 6 marks, please make sure that you raise 6 points. Talk about 6 fisheries in that sense. Let's get to B. So the B part of the question is saying, explain small-scale fishing methods used in Zambia. Explain small-scale fishing methods used in Zambia. Remember, there are large-scale or commercial fishing methods. There are small-scale or subsistence fishing methods. So examples of commercial fishing methods include seine netting, gill netting, the use of speedboats. So those are commercial fishing methods. Now, for subsistence or small-scale fishing methods used in Zambia, you can mention baskets and other traps, So people using this method do so for subsistence or livelihood, because you're not going to catch a lot of fish using traps. So traps of different types are used, which are mostly made of reeds and sticks. Baskets are either dragged through or lined up. Fish is driven in then into the baskets. Nets, there are three types of nets depending on the kind of fish caught. Sea nets are made of nylon material, with almost all of the features of the gill net fish becoming entangled when trying to escape. This type causes damage to the under environment. Scoop nets, these are lowered, these are nets, or the nets are lowered into water, and fish are then attracted into the net by a light in the middle. Fishing lines, these are in different kinds of bait. Bait is food for fish, are sometimes used by subsistence fishermen as well as by sports fishermen. Spears, fishing by using spears from land is done on rare occasions by subsistence fishermen. Please describe two methods used to mine minerals in Zambia. Describe two methods used to mine minerals in Zambia. 6 marks. Now, meaning if you see 6 marks there, it means you need to write, at least a minimum of 3 good points on each method of mining minerals in Zambia. So we have what we call underground mining or shaft mining. Now, underground mining, it is used to reach ores or valuable minerals in the ground by digging into the ground to extract them. They are reached through a shaft, which is sunk until the ores are reached. The network of tunnels is then made following ores seams. So shafts are basically the description of tunnels. So it is used when one body lies deep below the surface of the ground. When minerals are very, very deep underground, that is when we use underground or shaft mining. So they are lifts used to bring the ores to the surface, as well as to take miners underground. So these are the ones in our local language here we commonly call ifikwepe. These are elevators that take underground miners and also bring them to the surface, including the mineral ores themselves. So some shafts are sunk to depths of over 1,000 meters below the ground. Most of the minerals on the copper belt are underground. You have underground mines such as the Konkola copper mine. We have underground mines such as the Mopani, the Nkana mine. Those are some of the examples of underground mines that you can mention. Then we have open pit mining. Now, open pit mining is also known as surface mining. Open pit mining involves excavations. Cuts are made into the ground and the area around the edge of the mine is worked. It is the form of surface mining that is mainly used for core excavations. The rock and dirty covering the ore is removed. The waste from the first strip is used to fill up the last sand. Gravel, clay, granite, and other materials are used for building quarries. This method is cheaper and safer. It is used in mines such as Chambeshi, Dumwana, and Changa. This time around, you find a lot of open pit mines in northwestern provinces. Question: explain why the government has been promoting the increase in mineral production in recent years. Now, why has the government been promoting the increase in mineral production in recent years? Remember, Zambia's economy has mining as its backbone, meaning our economy is highly dependent on mining. So the government has promoted the increase in mineral production in the following ways. So one of the reasons as to why the government has been promoting the increase in mineral production in recent years is, number one, source of employment. Mining employs a lot of things. I might just be talking to somebody who knows one or two miners. Mining also contributes to the development of infrastructure like roads, railways, among others. Where there's a mine, there's a road leading to the mine, so that the minerals can be transported from the mine to other processing plants. It is also a source of foreign exchange. Development of towns, e.g. Copperbelt and northwestern provinces, are now developed and still developing as a result of mines. It is also a source of raw materials for manufacturing industries, those industries that make bullets. Where do you think they'll get the raw materials? Where do you think they'll get the copper from? It is the mines. So mines are a source of raw materials for manufacturing industries. It also contributes to the gross domestic product. When we say gross domestic product, we simply mean the total income generated from goods and services within the country. It also brings economic development, e.g. roads, railways. It also helps to develop social amenities and facilities such as schools, health centers, and other, recreational facilities. It also markets for safety clothing, mining equipment. So those companies that supply safety clothing and mining equipment happen to be the market. Let's get to question 3. What are the factors that influence weather in Zambia? Today, if you check the weather, how is it wherever you are? Now, here in Zambia, there are quite a number of factors that influence the weather. Why do we sometimes experience very cool temperatures? Sometimes very high temperatures, sometimes low rainfall, sometimes no rainfall at all, sometimes very high rainfall. So what are those factors that influence weather in Zambia? So one of the factors that influences weather in Zambia is altitude. Now when we say altitude, we mean how high or low a place is above sea level. So altitude refers to how high or low a place is above sea level. So in most cases, places of higher altitude are cooler places. Places at low altitude have higher temperatures. There's a saying that says that the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. So a high altitude place is expected to have cooler temperatures, and a lower altitude place is expected to have higher temperatures. That is why it is very, very hot in the valleys, because valleys happen to be low-lying areas, and it is quite cool in places that are mountainous. When you go to the summit of the mountain, you experience cooler temperatures. So higher altitudes give us lower temperatures, and lower altitudes give us high temperatures. Seasons are another factor that influence weather in Zambia. So the earth moves in two ways. The earth makes two movements, that is rotation and revolution. Rotation is the spinning of movement of the earth around its own axis. Revolution is the movement of the earth around the sun in its elliptical orbit. So those movements bring about seasonal changes and weather changes. So revolution brings about seasonal changes. So during cold season, temperatures are low, and during the hot season, temperatures are high. So season temperatures are high. During rain season, temperatures are low. Latitude. Latitude is another factor that influences weather. Now, this refers to the distance south or north of the equator. Close places to the equator are warmer, and places far away from the equator are cool. Places closer to the equator have more rainfall. Places away from the equator are dry. So the closer you move to the equator, the hotter it becomes. The further away you move from the equator, the cooler it becomes. The closer you are to the equator, the more rain you receive. That's why places that are found in the equatorial region tend to have very, very high rainfall and temperatures. Continentality is another factor that influences weather. Now, what do we mean when we say continentality? Now, when we say continentality, we mean places inside the continent have extreme differences, range of temperature compared to those near the sea, prevailing winds and distance from the sea, global air movements. The temperatures between parts of the world at different latitudes create a movement of air, and water is greatly swelling currents. These movements distribute heat energy from the sun across the planet. So that is about continentality as the factor that influences weather. Now let's get to ocean currents as another factor. Now when we say ocean currents, we mean they distribute heat energy from the sea of a certain place, and this affects its weather. Let's get to B. Analyze the impact of climate on human activities. Remember, human activities influence climate, and climate also influences human activities. An example of how human activities influence weather is when you cut down the trees, it means you're going to influence the amount of rainfall. There will be drought. So the human activity of cutting down trees influences climate in the sense that there will be drought because trees help in the formation of rainfall. Then the other human activity that influences climate is burning fossil fuels. If you're burning fossil fuels, it means you're emitting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, thereby contributing to global warming, thereby contributing to making the earth warmer. So human activities influence climate. However, climate also influences human activities, and these are some of the impacts of climate on human activities. Places with warm and wet climates attract farming. Warm and wet climate have attracted growth of trees, grass home of wild animals. Wildlife attract tourist activities. In hot areas like the Luangwa Valley, Gwembe Valley, fly infected. Hence, people find it difficult to live there or engage in livestock farming. Weather also affects aviation or pilots. Planes cannot move properly in stormy weather. When it is too cloudy, planes will not take off. So the weather also affects the plane. The weather also affects the movement of sea vessels like ships and boats. Where there is a storm or snow shock cannot move as visibility is affected. Climate also affects even the food that we eat. There are just certain foods that we eat during the rainy season. Foods like mushrooms, in most cases, certain fruits like mangoes, especially here in Africa, Zambia. Mangoes, we mostly eat them during the rainy season. So there are just certain foods that you eat during the rainy season. So climate influences human activities. It also influences what we wear. You cannot wear something that is very warm when it is warm. You cannot wear something that is too light and very short when it is cold. Meaning, climate influences human activities. Now let's get to part 2. That is the history part. Very interesting part. I love history. Just like I love geography and civics. Now let's get to part 2. Now part 2 says, with reference to the Luba-Lunda migration, explain the following. Number 1, A says causes. So what were the causes of the Luba-Lunda migration? Explain the causes of the Luba-Lunda migration. So these are some of the causes of the Luba-Lunda migration. So number 1, you can talk about increase in population. Force the migrants to go to other areas. The search for fertile land due to an increase in population as a result of introduction of new agricultural crops such as maize and cassava. Shortage of land use shortage of land due to population increase, and people need land for farming and keeping animals or livestock. Occupation. Many people were forced to go to areas where opportunities might be better, e.g., blacksmith, hunters, gatherers. Adventure. Others were attracted to certain areas such as to satisfy their curiosity. They wanted to learn more and experience other places. Succession disputes. They were forced to leave their kingdoms after conflicts to establish their own kingdoms or empires. Convicted people left to establish themselves elsewhere for fear of being punished after committing crimes or practicing witchcraft. Cruel rulers forced many other areas. Cruel rulers forced many to other areas. Chiti and Nkole, the founders of the Bemba kingdom, were forced to leave to go and establish their own settlement. Tribal wars. The people left in search of peace. The people left in search of peace and security in new areas. The people who were defeated also left for other lands to avoid paying tributes. Bantu customs contributed to migration, that is, the matrilineal system of descent, sons of the ruling chiefs who were defeated. Ambition, individuals who wanted to dominate or conquer other groups and bring them under their control also left, e.g., Kabinda Ilunga. Slave trading and raiding. People fled to other areas to maintain their independence. Family conqueror. People fled to other areas to maintain their independence. Family quarrels. Family quarrels, conflicts among family members contributed to migrations. Now, what were the results of the Lubalunda Bantu migration? What were the results? So here are some of the results. Establishment of powerful centralized kingdoms with a well-defined hierarchy, e.g. Bemba, Lozi, as well as Kalonga kingdoms. Introduced long-distance trade with the Portuguese and Swahili. Led to the creation of tribal identities. This was because various tribal groups identified themselves with groups they migrated with. Introduction of new customs, e.g., matrilineal and patrilineal lines of descent. Introduction of new crops and agricultural methods, e.g., maize, cassava, groundnuts, and tomatoes were introduced. Introduction of traditional ceremonies such as Kuomboka and Umutomboko ceremony of the Lozi people and the Lunda people, respectively. Let's get to question 2. Now, question 2 says, write about the late Stone Age under the following. Economic activities. Now, what were the economic activities of the late Stone Age? What were the economic activities of the late Stone Age? So some of the economic activities of the late Stone Age include the sun belonged to the late Stone Age group. For their survival, they depended on hunting, gathering, and fishing. The sun used a number of hunting methods, that is, bow and arrow, where they smeared with poison to make it more effective. Traps, where holes were dug and covered with grass and branches, and animals would be trapped. Animals would be trapped. Dressing in animal skin and pretend to be one. Using hunting dogs and chasing the animal in the direction of hiding men. They were food gatherers and collected wild fruits and edible fruits. They gathered grasshoppers, caterpillars, termites, and edible fruits, including roots. They kept a dog to help them hunt. So you can write any 5 from the ones we have highlighted here. Let's get to B. Social activities of the late Stone Age. Lived in bands of between 20 and 30 people. They were nomads. They moved from one place to another and therefore had small families. They lived in bands of 20 to 30 people. They were nomads and therefore had small families. They used animal skin for their clothes. They lived in caves and overhanging rocks. They used branches and grass to build simple shelters for protection. Had early marriages. Girls at 7 to 8 years got married to boys of over 15 years. Polygamy was widely practiced. They had few children, 3 to 4. Initiation ceremonies were practiced. There were gifted artists who painted rocks and symbolic drawings were made, e.g., naturalistic engravings, dirty white, schematic paintings. So these were artistically gifted. They used animal blood, ash, green and yellow leaves, and charcoal for painting, while animal bones, feathers, and tails as brush for painting. They painted pictures which were depicting their way of life due to their magic. They danced during leisure, and the importance of hunting was expressed in dances as they imitated the eland, scavenging of vultures and hyenas, and chasing of ostrich. Let's get to question 3. In relation to the Atlantic slave trade, briefly explain the following. Organization. How was the organization of the Atlantic slave trade? Now, the Atlantic slave trade is also known as the transatlantic triangular slave trade. The transatlantic triangular slave trade. Why do we call it the triangular slave trade? We call it the triangular slave trade because the items that were involved in the trade used a triangular format as it existed between, or rather as it existed among 3 continents. That is Europe, Africa, and the Americas. So, how was the Atlantic slave trade organized? How was the organization? So, the Atlantic slave trade developed after trade contacts between Old World and Afro-Eurasia and the New World, Americas. When we say Americas, we mean North and South America. It was organized in 3 major stages. Each stage involved a different continent. That is stage 1, Europe, stage 2, Africa, and stage 3, America. Now, what was stage 1? In this stage, European traders sailed to Africa with ships full of commodities and goods like guns and gunpowder, cloth, beads, iron, and glassware. These are items or commodities that Africans did not have. So when the Europeans, like Portuguese, Spanish, took these items to Africa, Africans were excited to exchange those goods with slaves. So stage 2, Africa. Europeans traded using barter system and exchanged their goods for African slaves at places such as Gold Coast, now Ghana, Slave Coast, now Senegal, Grain Coast, now Nigeria. So they traded these items with African slaves. Inland, the middlemen from Africa carried out the slave trade. Some of them worked for chiefs and others for independent trade. This was called caravan trade, as they traveled into the interior to exchange European goods for slaves. It was called caravan trade. So it was the interior movement of slave traders to go and exchange European goods for slaves. Stage 3. Stage 3. Americas. European traders shipped slaves through the Middle Passage or Golden Routes to the New World, the Americas. The slaves were sold to mines and plantation owners. The profit made from settling the slaves were taken back to Europe, where it could pay for more goods to trade in Africa. And some of the commodities that moved from Americas back to Europe included sugar cane, cotton, tobacco, and so on. And when these commodities were taken back to Europe, they were processed into finished goods, then sent back to Africa in exchange for slaves. So the trade continued with that cycle from Europe, Africa, Americas, Europe, just like that. It made that triangular route. So the main slave routes used in Africa were the North African route. Some slaves from West Africa were taken across Sub-Sahara to the parts of Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco, then shipped to Europe and Asia. West African routes from gold and slave coasts shipped to the Atlantic Ocean to America. East African route from here to Indian Ocean, Arabian Peninsula to the Far East, Central Africa to trade centers across Africa. Now, what were the causes of slave trade? What were the causes of slave trade? So one of the causes of slave trade was high demand. Slaves were in high demand all over the world. Arabs and Persians needed them for housework, while Portuguese, Spanish, and Americans needed them to work in large plantations. Manual labor and cheap labor is another reason for slave trade. They wanted cheap labor to establish cloth plantations that were planted on a large scale. Poor transport. The poorly developed transport network all over Africa before 19th century encouraged slave trade and slavery. Slaves, therefore, were used as means of transport for goods and services from one place to another. For example, when transporting elephant tusks. Introduction of guns. The chiefs got guns in return for natural resources found in their kingdoms. Those who acquired them thought they could be used at any time to raid slaves and make them available to those who wanted them. Then the other reason is to earn income. The plantation and mine owners soon decided that the best and cheapest workers were from Africa. Traders realized there was money to be made from supplying slaves. Rose in Industrial Revolution. The machines made the large-scale manufacture of goods possible, which resulted into increased production. As such, more cheaper labor was needed. Role played by Bartolomé de las Casas. He suggested that African people would make better workers as they could withstand the harsh conditions that the Native Americans could not. This made them to get slaves from the African continent. They knew to say African people are very hard working. They can resist even any type of condition. Hence, they knew that African people would make better workers. than Native Americans. Roles of Africans in the slave trade. Europeans supplied African tribes with guns and gunpowder in exchange of slaves. Desire for manufactured goods by African chiefs made them exchange products brought by Europeans with slaves, as slave trade was more profitable. So you can mention as many points as possible in the exam. Now let's get to part 3. Very interesting part, and that is the civics part. Question 1. Question 1A says, describe Zambia's national motto. 2 marks. So Zambia's national motto says, one Zambia, one nation. That is Zambia's national motto. One Zambia, one nation. It is a slogan which emphasizes the need for unity in a country of over 72 ethnic groups. A motto aimed at fostering national unity. One Zambia, one nation. Can somebody say that? 1B says, explain the importance of Zambia's national motto. Why is Zambia's national motto important? Number 1, it unites all the 73 tribes together, reduce or minimize ethnic tension in the Zambian country. It reduce or minimize ethnic tension in the country, unites Zambia and Africa for a common good as expressed by heads of states. Reminds us that although Zambia unites Zambia and Africa for a common good as expressed by heads of state, reminds us that although Zambia was made up of various ethnic groupings, it was one nation. Develops a sense of belonging to the state or nation, that we have a duty to be tolerant of differences. No one persecuted the bearers of truth in the past because truth was not acceptable. It aims at fostering national unity. It also emphasizes the need for unity in a country. So you can mention those, important aspects of the Zambia's national motto. Let's get to question 2. What is a political party? If I'm to ask you a question, I'm sure you can cite some of the examples of political parties that you know at the back of your head. So question 2 says, what is a political party? A political party is a group of persons organized to acquire and exercise political power. This is a group of people coming together to promote a political agenda. And in most cases, a political agenda that it is there to promote is to form government. An organization that coordinates candidates to compete to a particular country's election. 2B says, what are the advantages of multipartism? Remember, you have multipartism, you have one-party system, you also have a bi-party system. So a one-party system is where only one political party is allowed to form government. Only one political party is allowed to participate in elections. A bi-party, this is where you have two major political parties competing in an election, like the case of the United States of America, for the Congress and the Republicans. That's a bi-party political system. Then we have a multi-party political system like we have in Zambia, which is a political system that allows multiple political parties to participate in an election. Now, what are the advantages of multi-party system or multipartism? Number 1, wider freedom of political choice. You're not only limited to one political party or two political parties, you have the right or opportunity to choose from a wide range of political parties. Voters also get much better representation to ensure a better system of checks and balances. It also allows political views to be represented. It increases representation of diverse political views and more choices for voters. It also encourages a higher voter turnout. It ensures greater transparency in governance. Having a lot of political parties competing gives us health competition, better decision making. If the ruling party is not working properly, then people have the right to replace it with another party. Just like here in Zambia, the party that is in power now replaced another political party which people thought they did not perform accordingly. It also prevents dictatorship. It also promotes tolerance and respect for the views, opinions, and beliefs of others. It also promotes respect for human rights, promotion of national unity, promotion of accountability and transparency in government, respect for the rule of law, resolution of disputes through dialogue. Dialogue is basically conversations, negotiation. Respect for social justice means that all citizens are equal before the law. Let's get to question 3. Petty corruption. Explain the term petty corruption. Remember, there are 3 types of corruption. We have petty corruption, grand corruption, and political corruption. Petty corruption is a type of corruption that involves small amount of money or small figures. You're talking about corruption that involves 100 kwacha, 200 kwacha, 1,000 kwacha. You're looking at corruption that involves small amounts of money. But grand corruption involves huge amounts of money. You're talking about millions of kwacha. Political corruption is the type of corruption which occurs in the during the electoral process, during campaigns and the like, for political party candidates or election candidates to win supporters. They end up corrupting them or giving them bribes so that they can vote for them. That is political corruption. Now, petty corruption, in other words, is a type of corruption marked by small acts of corruption for small favors or benefits. The type of corruption that involves bribery and is commonly called nchekelako, meaning give me my cut. This is the type that involves small sums of money. That is petty corruption. Now, how can a young person be involved in the fight against corruption? What is your duty as a young person in the fight against? What is your duty as a young person in the fight against corruption? Saying no to corruption. Rule number 1. Remember, ending corruption begins with you and I by saying no to corruption. So saying no to corruption by talking about the damage caused by corruption with your friends, family, and neighbors. Removing corrupt leaders by voting against them in elections. Encourage a culture of honesty in your community. Getting help from government officials. Saying no to paying bribes. Increase your understanding by reading newspapers, articles, and following radio and television programs. Sensitizing members of the community through songs, debates, and drama. Report suspected corruption anonymously. You do not need to give your name if you are afraid. There is a law that protects you as a person reporting, corruption, and that is the Whistleblowers Act. You, the person who is reporting corrupt officers, you are known as a whistleblower. So you can report corrupt acts anonymously without giving your identity. So we have come to the end of the lesson. Thank you so much for your time. Stay glued to the channel for more content.